thank you for inviting me to testify today. My research has been primarily on IPO methods in various countries, and in the last 3 decades, there's been a lot of experimentation in various countries with different methods. Now, one of the main points I want to make today is that the US method, commonly called book building, is the most popular method around the planet. And it wasn't always that way. If you go back to the early 1990s, it was used really only in the US and sometimes Canada. By the end of the 1990s, it was the dominant method, and it's become even more popular since then. Now, the difference between book building and the other methods is that with book building, the underwriter gets feedback from investors before setting the offer price. And it's not always easy to get people to honestly tell you that they like an offering if you know that you're going to use that information to raise the price. And that's why it's important that the underwriter also controls allocations, who gets what. So by controlling allocations, the underwriter can favor regular investors that don't just try to cherry pick the hot offerings, can favor investors that give feedback that help to set the price, and can favor long-term investors. So there are reasons why the underwriter may favor institutional investors. Ordinary investors may not have the expertise or resources to play the same role in an IPO. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't participate. If you look around the world, most countries open up the IPO process to all ordinary investors. But the key is that they open up the allocations, but they do not control the price setting. The ordinary investors don't help to set the price for IPOs. They just get a chance to get shares. So the most popular method outside the US is a hybrid or a combination where they have a tranche that uses book building, and they use that to set the price and allocate to institutional investors. And then for ordinary investors, they have a separate tranche. Ahead of time, it's announced what proportion of shares will go into each tranche, and everyone is allowed to order shares in the retail tranche. And if it's oversubscribed, they have basically a lottery. So it's open, it's transparent, everyone has a chance to get shares, but they don't disrupt the price-setting process. That's the method that has worked well around the world. The method that has not worked well around the world is to use an auction that's open to everyone so that everyone has an equal say in setting the price. I don't want to use up too much of my introductory time, but I'd be happy to answer questions on that. The auction method has been used in more than 24 countries, and they've pretty much all abandoned it because of huge problems. When I was doing literature searches or newspaper searches to find out more about various IPO auctions, I learned that good search terms were flop, disaster, debacle, catastrophe, calamity. The auction method is one that has blown up in people's faces around the world, which is why countries stopped using it. Retail investors should be allowed to participate, but you have to be very careful about giving them a major role in the price-setting process. So what should the U.S. do? Frankly, I'm neutral on whether the U.S. should require issuers to give a bigger role to ordinary investors. But I feel strongly that if we're going to do that, it should be through the hybrid method with a separate tranche so that everyone has an equal chance of getting shares, but it doesn't disrupt the price setting. Last, on the role that small investors should play in private equity, and in particular crowdfunding, where you have maybe a website and a bunch of people put up a few $100s each, I see 2 big problems with that. The first is who's going to do the due diligence. Fraud is a major problem with these. Someone needs to screen these offerings before they get funding, and someone needs to continue to monitor them. And if we don't find a way to do that, crowdfunding could be a disaster for ordinary investors. And the second question is who's going to set the price? I hope that I've communicated that letting ordinary investors price IPOs has been disastrous. And if they're not good at pricing relatively sophisticated or advanced IPOs, then there's even less reason to think that they can price early-stage startups. Again, thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ms. Meyer.